I will call this Tigard City Council meeting to order. City Recorder Krager, please call roll.
Councillor Shaw,
Here.
Council President Wolf,
Here.
Youth Councillor Manini,
Here.
Councillor Godusi,
Present.
Councillor Hu,
Here.
Mayor Lube,
Here.
Councillor Robbins,
Here.
Councillor Slack.
Here.
Thank you. If everyone will please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you, everyone. I have one non-agenda item for some proclamations to be added. Is there anything additional to be added today from the city team or council? Seeing none? Okay. So we will move on to proclamations. March 2025 is going to be Developmental Disabilities Awareness Month. Where people with developmental disabilities come from diverse racial, ethnic, social, religious, educational, and economic backgrounds and are valued members of society who strive to enjoy everyday life. So an important topic. March 2025 is also Women's History Month, where women of every race, class, and ethnic background have made historic contributions to the growth and strength of our country in countless recorded and unrecorded ways, including some women who I sit next to continue to make history in Tigard alongside me. And then March 8th will be International Women's Day, which is observed annually on March 8th, celebrating the social, economic, cultural, and political achievements of women around the world. The details of all of these proclamations will be added online, and they will be available up in City Hall this month. We will move on to public comment. If you would like to provide public comment by telephone, the phone number is 503-966-4101. Please call to get into the queue. Please dial now or log in to provide testimony by video. Anyone present wanting to comment, if you haven't already, there is a sign-up sheet when you enter the room. We did receive two written comments by noon yesterday. Both of them were in regards to food cart regulations, and that was Jenny Lopez and George Miller. And not to be a spoiler, but we also have them signed up in person to speak with us. So I have you first, George, if you'd like to come up or and provide us public comment. Yeah, that's totally fine. Come on up.
I didn't want to be just committed to 2 minutes if both of us sit down.
Yeah. Well, you can have 4 minutes between the two of you. How does that work?
Thank you.
Excellent. Yeah. So if you would just let us know your name and then what city you live in. And you will need to turn your microphones on for them to turn green so the people tuning in remotely can hear you. Welcome.
Thank you. My name is George Miller. And
Oh, excuse me, could you move your mic closer? Yeah, thank you.
I'm a proud property owner in the city of Tigard, which is why I'm here tonight. We purchased Hudson Plaza in the fall of 21, and we got it from the Hendersons. And if you're not familiar, it's the property where the Papa John's Pizza is at the corner of Walnut and Pacific Highway. Jenny and I have been working for a year and a half about putting in a food pod cart. And we've been thinking about it. If we can do this, we can do that, we can put a bar in. And so we didn't get really started down the road until last fall. And we've been working with the planning and building department up, during that time. We went down, the plumber and electrician, went down to apply for permits the 1st of February, and we were shocked to see that the rules had changed. The rules that have been working in the past were not the same. And we don't know if we can meet the rules, technically meet the rules, We know if we can, they're going to be financially so burdensome, initial cost, that we can technically be in it but not be financial. Or we have to like take out so many tables or something, it just won't be economical to run. We think we have an excellent case to be grandfathered in. The planning department disagrees, and of course that's their right to disagree. I used to be, involved. Is that all? My time's up?
That was 2 minutes. So, well, they set another timer. You can continue.
Thank you. Appreciate that. I've got so much, I could talk all day about this. So the planning department disagrees. They interpret it different than we did. Interpretation, that's fine. So I was thinking, I didn't put that in my written comments because this thing has been rushing so fast. I rushed to get the written comments in, but I was thinking today, I think how could the relief we're asking for is if you could change it to non-emergency and give us time, like virtually, I believe, almost every other rules like this you passed are not passed under emergency and people have time to respond. And give us time to respond. And, we've already spent $50,000 on this food pod card. We already have the utilities and playing under the other rules. So I'm simply asking before I run out of another 2 minutes, if you could pull back the emergency clause that you put in, and we'll be happy campers, and we will give you an excellent food card pod that you will be proud of. And under the old rules, we can meet all your goals that you have set out to meet with the new rules. And you don't have to take my word for it. Come on down anytime. I'll show you the pod. You can have one of Jenny's wonderful smash burgers. And we can show you we can meet all the rules, all the goals under the existing rules. And I could keep going for another hour, but I think I used my time twice now.
Jenny, did you have anything that you wanted to add?
Yeah, I will take my 2 minutes. I just want to say thank you, council. Thank you, mayor, for allowing us to be here. And I wrote something out just to make it a little bit easier. So my name is Jenny Lopez, and I am a longtime Tigard resident, a small business owner, and someone deeply committed to this community and the future. My family and I have invested everything into creating a space where local entrepreneurs can thrive, families can come and connect, and Tigard's economy can grow. In 2023, my husband and I opened up Love Eat Smash Burgers and True Reflection Barbershop right here in Tigard. That was a goal of mine as a resident to own a business here. These businesses are more than just places to eat and work. They're opportunities. We've hired family, friends, local youth. We've created jobs and mentorship opportunities. I'm sorry, I'm gonna get emotional. Okay, that's why we take the steps that's why we took these steps to develop this food pod alongside this indoor tap house. Our goal is to give food cart owners year-round opportunity to be able to provide the community with an indoor space to eat, because we live in Oregon and we know how that goes. So we followed the process. We spent months planning, hiring consultants, working with architects, securing utilities, and even purchasing a new food truck to contribute to this vision. But in January, with these new regulations were introduced without warning, placing unexpected barriers in our path and putting everything we've worked for at risk. The planning development even stated that business owners would have 60 to 90 days to document pre-existing food carts, and we are well within that time frame, yet only 2 of our carts qualify. Why, is my question. How can a project this far along suddenly be left without a path forward? I know this Tigard's values are built on equity, economy, engagement. We are entrepreneurs. We are a minority-owned business working to help uplift others. Can I keep going a little bit? Okay. We're trying to create those opportunities, not just for our family, but for other small business owners like Josh Karen, formerly part of the Tigard's Launch Pod, West Coast Tortas, who had to shut down his food cart when the contract expired, and he has been working for us. So we've hired him, and that's what we're about, is giving people opportunity. Him and his brother want to be a part of this pod, and they are also ready to restart, relaunch, reopen West Coast Tortas, because they've been had to close. And But with these new regulations, it's almost making it impossible for us to be able to do that. We're not asking for special treatment. We are asking for fairness and just a way for us to be able to move forward, because that does align with Tigard's goals. And additionally, I do want to highlight one other thing, was the $13,000 for the annual water and sewage hookup fee per food carts. Okay, the $13,000. So it's just another barrier. Food carts are expensive to open, and that is just another barrier that's going to prevent people from being able to do that. And so I just want to highlight that, and it seems like that charge is a little extreme compared to residential, commercial sewage usage and dumpage. Additionally, I know the reason to pass this was the emergency, it said, was based on the grease trap situation. We have had Clearwater Services come out to our pod, inspect our food trucks, and we are in alignment with that. So each truck has their own grease trap. So we are currently it's been inspected. We are following all of those rules. So just to be able to have more time, and we trust your leadership. We just really want a way that we can move forward and that we don't have to waste everything that we put into. So thank you for your time.
Thank you both for being here. Can I ask Sambo, are you available to step out and have a conversation? Sambo is our community development director, and so it's a good connection for you to make. Thank you for being here. Mr. Wold, are there any phone callers in the queue or anyone wishing to testify by video today?
Mayor, there are no callers in the queue, no requests for video comment.
Okay, thank you so much. We now have our city manager report with interim city manager Drake.
Thank you, Mayor. A lot of exciting things going on in Tigard, and an awful lot of energy for end of winter. For those celebrating Easter, it is coming. Registration is now open for the Easter egg hunt at Cook Family Park on April 19th from 8:45 to 10:30. Folks can find registration on the city's website, and there's discussion about maybe two types of Easter egg hunt, so that some smaller children don't get overwhelmed. There might be a separate, maybe a little less hectic hunt for those children that maybe can't defend themselves. As watching my children over the years when they were young, these can be fun and sort of wild too. So that is available. We hope folks will enjoy it and take the opportunity. Also, giving you an update on the parking data collection study that's going on in downtown. I asked for a staff report today and was able to get a little very brief synopsis of what's going on. The data collection of on-street parking utilization in downtown and parts of the Triangle started just yesterday. A contractor will be gathering data to get a baseline of parking space use broken down by time and street sections. And also, if you see a white car with cameras on its roof driving around slowly, that's what it's for. So they're keeping a visual count of what's happening so that it's accurate. Fourth, we are working to update the parking webpage with new information on the program. And lastly, the city has started contacting area businesses on the second business forum early April to update them on the program and the data that we'll have since the start. So this will be documented and logged, and try and use it to utilize to come up with a effective program. There's another opportunity for folks to learn more about what's happening in the city, and that is on Saturday, March 15th at City Hall from 9 to 1, 9:30 to 1. And this is for the city's police and public works facility project that's going to be likely be brought forward by the city council. And folks will have an opportunity to meet the project team that's being assembled for the proposed project. You can ask questions. People, folks from police and public works will be there. The project manager will be there. So there's an opportunity for folks to learn what the council is looking at and bringing forward. And you can share comments and also participate in the event. So we hope people will take advantage of this. And this is the first step of a long journey, but in the end, there'd be a new combined police and public works facility. So the public is welcome. I'd be happy to answer any questions. Tonight, I could probably go on all night, but I won't, but I'd be happy to answer questions.
Any questions? Yeah, Councillor Hu?
I apologize if you already said that, but the parking study will include collection of data of how many people overstay the limit, right?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
And just the actual use, and it should reveal a lot so that whatever solution, if there's a solid one, it'll be even more solid. And so we'll learn more and see if we can get a good program. It's been looked at for a long time, and we know the council is sincere in getting this done, and we know the business community is very interested in it. And I've seen this done in other cities I've managed, and it's a critical juncture, I think, for understanding downtown and what it is that the community wants.
All right, thank you so
Thank
much.
you. Mayor, if I may say just one point, you should find there a two-sided handout, and it was requested by Councillor Hu for the discussion coming up on 4th of July. So that's for your use during our discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. The next item on our agenda is a legislative public hearing on system development charges and temporary certificates of occupancy. I will open the public hearing. Anyone wishing to testify by phone or video, please call in now or log in to get into the queue. The phone number is 503-966-4101. And anyone wishing to comment in person, there is a sign-up sheet specifically for this item as you enter the room. Welcome, Senior Planner Lindor.
Good evening. Thank you. Good evening, Mayor Lube and members of the council. My name is Agnes Lindor. I'm a senior planner in the Community Development Department. The item before you tonight is a public hearing to amend Chapter 3.24 of the Municipal Code to address the collection of system development charges, SDCs, and temporary certificates of occupancy. Next slide, please. So SDCs are collected to reimburse the city for impacts to public infrastructure that result from development. The current code allows deferring the payments of certain SDCs prior to the city's final action, which is typically either a final inspection or a permanent certificate of occupancy. Temporary certificate of occupancies are not addressed. Additionally, with the Tyler update, and specifically EPL, which is the new permitting software, it's enterprise permitting and licensing. Through this process, there were some process improvements that were identified to the temporary use process as it relates to the collection of SDCs. Next slide, please. So the purpose of tonight's amendment is to address temporary certificates of occupancy and the collection of SDCs, because again, our code is silent and there's currently a loophole for TCOs. The proposed change would require the collection of deferred SDCs prior to the issuance of a temporary certificate of occupancy, which is at the same time that the impact from the development would occur. Before I conclude my presentation, I received a few questions from council that I'd like to address now. The first one was the pros and cons of making SDCs payable prior to the issuance of a building permit instead of a certificate of occupancy or final inspection. So prior to 2020, we only allowed deferrals for commercial projects. Shortly after that, we added residential developments into the deferrals process, so they would have the same opportunity as other types of development. Some of the considerations for deferrals included financial feasibility from developers. Many developers use construction loans to fund their projects, including the payment of SDCs, and they pay the carrying costs of those SDCs throughout the construction project, and typically construction loans are higher interest rate than a standard conventional loan, and as a result, the cost of the SDCs over time is higher because of the financing piece. Upfront payments can also be a burden, especially for needed housing developers. They can also potentially prohibit or delay development altogether. So allowing deferrals provides more flexibility and access to capital during the construction process for developers. I just wanted to make it clear that tonight's amendment there isn't a change proposed on whether we should or shouldn't allow deferrals. It's really a clarification specific to the temporary certificate of occupancy process. So the next question was the fiscal impacts of the existing loophole in collecting SDCs. So this is kind of a tough question to answer because it really is based on the time value of money, meaning the amount of SDCs that are being deferred and the length of the TCO that's being granted. So TCOs can stretch anywhere from a month to 2 months to sometimes years. And by the time we collect these SDCs, infrastructure costs have risen and the SDCs have decreased in value, so they don't provide as much of the funding as they would have if they were collected earlier. And then the last question was related to providing examples where certificates of occupancy would trigger SDCs and ones that would not trigger SDCs. So SDCs are typically collected or would be due for new development or if there is an addition to square footage of an existing building. And that's true for commercial because commercial SDCs are based on square footage, whereas residential are based on per unit count. So if you add 500 square feet to your house and it's still 1 unit at the end, there wouldn't be any additional charges. Another example where SDCs would be due would be associated with a change of use. This would occur when you have an existing building that's occupied by an office or a furniture store, for example, and then it's being converted to a fast food restaurant or something that basically generates more traffic than the previous use. Situations where no SDCs would be due would be tenant improvements, where there's no change of use. Basically, an office tenant that's doing some interior work that's going to remain an office. Another situation would include where there is a change of use, however, the proposed use is a use that generates less traffic. So to my previous example, if you had fast food and it was going to office, that would not require SDCs. Slide, please. So with that, staff recommends that council adopt the proposed amendments as presented. However, based on council's policy of having 2 readings, this item will be back before you on April 1st, of course, unless council decides to take action tonight. Next slide, please. So this concludes staff's presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. There were no written comments received for this item by noon on Monday. Mr. Wold, are there any phone callers in the queue or anyone wishing to testify by video?
Mayor, there are no callers in the queue, no requests for video comment.
All right, thank you so much. And so there's no response to testimony. Are there any questions specifically on this? Yes, Councilor Robbins.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you for your presentation. You actually answered some questions that I had gotten too, so I appreciate that. Could you give an example of someone who, a project where there would be a temporary certificate of occupancy, you know, like the reasoning for that? And also, is this something where once we change this, are we going to, like, are there people, perhaps you can't answer this, but are there projects in the works right now where someone is planning on getting a temporary certificate of occupancy and will be surprised if we change this? Or do you even, do you hear about things like that?
So I'm not familiar with a specific example where I know that there will be requesting a TCO. Typically, what we see through like why people would request a TCO is, well, most recently it was because of COVID, because there was a lot of things that they weren't able to obtain, like as far as construction materials, like fencing, for example. So they may not continue or they may not be able to finish all of their site improvements, but they're finished with the building and the building is safe to occupy, so they want to move in. But because of either funding or, you know, shipping or delivery constraints, they're not able to get the product in to install it. Like that would be an example where we see fairly often.
Councillor Hu?
Thank you, Agnes. The first question was from mine. I was just wondering, you know, what happens if we make SDC due and payable before the issuance of a construction permit? So I think you were trying to say that you'll make it difficult for people to get a loan because they will have to incur interest if they were required to pay SDC earlier. Is that?
Yeah, so basically the loan would include the SDCs that they would have to pay, and so
Okay.
it's basically a larger chunk that they would have to finance, and so over time it's compounding, and it's going to result in, you know, them paying more through the loan if
Got
they,
it.
yeah.
All right. So I guess if the policy for us to encourage development, we should not require people to pay upfront. So it will give them more time to get the money later on and incur less interest.
Correct, yeah,
Okay.
that was previous council discussions. I don't believe it was this council, but,
Got it.
yeah.
Got it. All right. So, all right. Thank you. And just from the reading this proposed ordinance, so the subsection B says, you know, all other SDC are due and payable prior to the issuance of a temporary certificate of occupancy, if applicable, or prior to final inspection or insurance of permanent certificate of occupancy, whichever is the city's final action. So the sentence, whichever is the city's final action, that's to describe the issuance of the final inspection or the issuance of permanent certificate. Is that?
Yes, because sometimes there's not a certificate of occupancy, there's just a final inspection, so we just wanted to make sure that it covered both.
Okay. Yeah, but the way it is written right now, it's a little confusing to me when I read it, because when you say whichever is the city's final action, I thought, when I first read it, I thought that included issuance of a temporary certificate of occupancy as well.
I see what you mean.
So I would prefer to break that subsection B to further subsection 1 and 2.
Sure.
So it's just make it easier to understand, you know, the sentence, whichever is the city's final action is applicable to. So,
Sure.
so to make sure that it does not apply to the temporary certificate of occupancy. So I would prefer it's written, you know, break it up a little bit so it's easier to read. Thank you.
Councillor Gaddusi?
Thank you. Counselor who actually answered one of my questions about one of the negatives, the cons being a financial burden to developers that were expecting to defer payment. But in terms of the pros, it seems like it would primarily be that the city government gets more predictable and timely collection. Is that correct?
That's correct also,
All
yes.
right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any additional questions? No? Okay. Seeing none, I will close the public hearing. We have two paths forward. We could vote on this ordinance tonight, or we could have deliberations and direct staff to make changes, or make no changes and bring it back. And again, I guess that's like, what, 2 weeks, 3 weeks? Because we're,
April 1st.
ooh, that's a long time.
Yes.
Okay. Counselor who?
I apologize, Mayor. I forgot I wasn't supposed to comment on it, so sorry. Yeah, so as I said, I would prefer to have a rewritten version where we just, parse out the two parts so it's easier to understand, because right now when you put everything together in one sentence, it's, for me at least, it's difficult to understand which part apply to which. So that will be my request. So thank you.
Counselor Robbins?
In an effort to be as transparent and give people as much time to think about things as possible, I would like to see us bring this back on April 1st with or without the changes, to make it more clear if we work with the city attorney on that. But since we've gotten some public comment recently about another ordinance that we put into effect coming a little too quickly for those particular projects, I'd like to have the ample time to give people a chance to review it.
Any additional questions or comments? Yeah, Council President Wolf?
Thank you, Mayor. To Councilor Robbins' point, Agnes, how much is this promoted on our website or shared with developers, so that's kind of, because clearly we didn't have public comment or anything brought to us this evening. It's not to say that it's not out there, but just curious about that process on the city side to let developers know.
Yeah, so this was posted just on the city's website, as typically legislative hearings are, so it's available to the public.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mayor. I have no issue with proceeding with the substance of what is being proposed by staff. I totally agree we should make the collections process as smooth as possible from the city side and more predictable. To Councilor Robbins' point about providing more time, I'm fine coming back on April 1st, potentially with some amendments like Councilor Hoop suggested, but I just want to note that Section 2 says that the ordinance is effective 30 days after its passage. So there is already baked into this some time, unlike the previous amendments that we heard public comment on earlier, where it was an emergency clause and it was less than 30 days where it went into effect.
I also want to add that I think the public comments were a substantive, almost policy-like change, where this is a technicality that we're fixing, and it feels like a very different ordinance to me. I know Councilor Hu has specificity on some language, and that's fine, but I'm totally supportive, even if we were to write it and take care of it tonight, because this isn't something up for debate. Like, we want people to pay these SDCs, and we're fixing a loophole that people could be continuing to take advantage of, especially now that we've publicized it, that it's there. So I'm in favor of actually this one specifically working itself out rather quickly, because there is no downside. This is something that they should be paying anyway, and there should be the expectation that it should be paid when they move into the building. And I will just add, this was a very robust discussion of when to collect SDCs several years ago, that the council really thoroughly went through. So I just want to add that. Councilor Hu?
I'll be happy to attempt at making an amendment on the fly right now if you want to entertain.
I mean, I guess, is that something people are comfortable with, or do you want to wait until April? This one to me doesn't feel like it needs additional time, but.
I'm happy to entertain the motion.
Okay.
I believe in you.
All right. Well, city attorney can correct me if I'm wrong. So I move to approve ordinance number 25-02 with amendment to insert the word earlier of, after prior, payable prior, and insert the number 1 before two issuance, and change the comma after applicable to semicolon, and after that insert the word number 2, the letter number 2.
Can you just maybe read what you would like to see?
Okay.
Because I don't think anyone is following this.
Okay,
So I think just say replace this subsection with this verbiage,
Okay,
and that would be
so-
excellent.
Replace section 1. So right now, the ordinance 3.24.080 A2B will be read as all other SDCs are due and payable prior to the earlier 1 issuance of a temporary certificate of occupancy, if applicable, semicolon, 2, or prior to final inspection or the issuance of permanent certificate of occupancy, with comma, whichever is city's final actions, semicolon, on the buildings or plumbing permit to which the fee relate, period.
I just want to look at city attorney and make sure that I think is something she's comfortable with before I ask for a second.
So, thank you, Mayor and Council. So I think I am, with the exception of the last semicolon.
Okay.
Should just be a comma.
Yes.
Just comma,
Yeah.
okay.
Excellent. That's
Anybody
what I
need
thought
me-
too. Thank you.
Anybody
Okay.
need me to read it again, or you're all good?
I think it's clear for the record that your last semicolon should be a comma.
comma.
Okay.
All right. All right.
Is there a second?
Mayor, I'd be I yield to Councilor Shaw's second.
Excellent. It's been moved and seconded with an amendment on the proposed ordinance. Will the city recorder please read the number and title of the ordinance?
Ordinance number 25-02, an ordinance amending Tigard Municipal Code, Chapter 3.24, regarding the collection of system development charges prior to temporary certificate of occupancy, as amended.
Thank you. Will the city recorder conduct a roll call vote, starting with the youth councilor Minany for an advisory vote?
Youth Councilor Manini,
Yes.
Councilor Shaw,
Yes.
Council President Wolf,
Yes.
Councilor Godusi, Councilor Hu,
Yes.
Mayor Lube,
Yes.
Councilor Robbins,
Yes.
Councilor Slack.
Yes.
All right. The motion is adopted by unanimous vote of the council. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
The next item on our agenda is a legislative public hearing, an ordinance amending Tigard Municipal Code 3.44 regarding surplus real property. I am going to open the legislative public hearing. And anyone wishing to testify by phone or video, please call in or log in to get into the queue. The phone number is 503-966-4101. And anyone wishing to comment in person, there is a sign-up sheet specifically at the entrance of the room for this item. And we have City Attorney Rahala here to give the staff report.
Good evening, Council. So this is a cleanup housekeeping ordinance. This is in the file of old ordinances that needed updating many years ago. So this ordinance deals with the disposition of real property. So this would be real property that the city no longer needs. The previous version differentiated between substandard undeveloped property, standard undeveloped property, and developed property. That distinction is not based on statute or any other applicable laws that we have to follow. That was a creation of Tigard, and it hasn't served any purpose over the course of the years. So the proposal before you tonight is really just to streamline it so that it is more consistent with the ORS for disposition of real property. The proposal is essentially that whenever the city has a piece of real property that it no longer needs, that it would come before council. Council would make a finding that the public interest is furthered by the disposition of the property, and then council would direct the city manager to effectuate that sale. We believe that this is sufficient public process. The public will have an opportunity to weigh in at the public hearing and offer any comments to council about whether the public interest is furthered or not. So we can take out the newspaper notice and a lot of the other antiquated requirements in the current version of the code. Broker selection is also deleted. That process would comply with Oregon public contracting rules and the city's public contracting rules. So we would defer to existing procedures for that, and we can take that section out as well. There are a couple yellow highlights before you on the paper that you have at the dais. Those were last-minute clarifications. So subsection A refers to the city may sell, exchange, or convey, whereas B and C just referred to sell. So the proposal is to clarify that that disposition refers to the disposition of any property, no matter how it's done, by sale, exchange, or conveyance. So using the more generic dispose of as opposed to sell. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
There was no written comments received by noon on Monday. Mr. Wold, are there any phone callers in the queue or anyone wishing to testify by video today?
Mayor, there are no callers in the queue, no requests for video comment.
Okay. City Recorder Krager, has anyone signed up in person?
No one signed up.
Okay, thank you so much. Are there any questions and questions only for the city attorney? Yep, Councilor Stack?
Thank you, Mayor. I'm just curious a little bit about the history of the previous ordinance. It sounded like this was pretty idiosyncratic to Tigard. Do you have any information about why these original things were prescribed? And if not, that's fine. I'm just curious.
I don't. In looking at other city codes, it looks like the majority are actually silent on disposition of real property and would just defer to the rules already in state statute. There was a similar city to Tigard's that had the substandard undeveloped. I don't recall which city that was. So part of me wonders if it was a League of Oregon Cities model at one time. But I believe the code was drafted in late 60s, I think. So it would have been a long time ago that it was developed.
Councilor Hu?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, City Attorney. So when you describe what this new ordinance is intended for, it just dawned on me because the word "or" when the public interest is furthered, it sounds to me like, because you said that when the city no longer needs a property and public interest is further, it sounds like those are two requirements. Both are needed, but the word here "or" threw me off a little bit. It sounds to me if those two conditions are both needed, shouldn't it be "and"? Or because when you say "or," that means sounds like there's other circumstances under which the city can sell the property.
So but statute only requires that the council make a finding that the public interest is furthered. The determination that it's not needed for the public use is obvious by the fact that staff is bringing it to council that we wish to dispose of the property. So this proposal before you doesn't include a finding on that because the fact that we're requesting to dispose of is self-evident. So the only statutory finding is that the public interest is furthered.
Okay, so yeah, we too had some email exchange before this. So I asked you that the statute specifically said that even when the city still need a property, the city can still sell it, provided the council makes the the further public interest determination. So my question is, the new ordinance, if we adopt it, still will allow the city to sell property that is still needed if the council makes the further public interest determination. Is that correct?
Correct. The language in subsection A is consistent with the language in statute.
Okay, thank you. And just to be clear, I read the state statute and it's not very clear. So I totally blame the state statute for the confusing language we have here. So thank you.
I have a question. Are there any ordinances that we have changed or like, so I'm talking about section B. It says if the city council decides to dispose of the property, the city manager or designee will take further appropriate action, and it's specifically getting rid of the city council's action to direct the city manager. Are there other ordinances where we, for lack of a better phrase, like are ceding our authority by just automatically giving it to the city manager? Or is this something, because I can't think of a circumstance in which we've taken that away before, and so I'm just curious.
Yeah, thanks for that. So I think the analogy when I was deciding what language to strike, it was more consistent with council's actions, that every time it passes an agreement or approves a property sale, a purchase, the last ones that we've had, council's action has always been and direct the city manager to take appropriate steps. So I was modeling it after something like that. So in terms of other comparable ones, no, not that I can think of. Yeah.
Are there any additional questions specifically on this? Yeah, Councilor Schleck?
I was just going to say, just sort of going through my memory, I recall the parking ordinance was similar in the sense that it was removing council's authority and it was going to hand it to the city manager, but ultimately we never approved that one. So that's the only other time I remember something like that coming before council.
Okay, I will close the public hearing. And we could either vote on this ordinance, make changes, and have it come back, or make changes and vote. I will just say my request would be to keep the will direct city manager or designee in the ordinance. I think that's consistent with our other ordinances and our actions, but that is my preference. Councilor Shaw?
Thank you, Mayor. Following B and C, when it says City Council has the final authority to approve or disapprove the final terms, to me that said we were going to have ultimate authority anyway, and that's why I didn't take issue with B, but that was just mine. But if your preference is to keep it in, that'd be fine. But to me, that answered that question, and I was just going to go ahead and move to approve if there wasn't additional questions.
Seconded.
Councilor who?
I guess I have no problem with the mayor's request as well, and I just want to discuss after subsection C, after the city council have the final authority to approve or disapprove of the final term of the disposal. Everything else after that seems still very prescribed to me. It's very detailed. I just don't know. Do we really need that kind of detail in the ordinance of, you know, we may approve the term of the agreement and the form. Do we have to approve the agreement form? I don't remember we ever have to do that. So I would actually prefer just keep only the first sentence of C and get rid of everything else after that. Unless there's a specific reason we need to pre-approve agreement form. I don't even know what agreement form is.
Well,
So.
I will tell you in my 6 years, we haven't sold property, so this has not come up.
Okay, so.
We have purchased property, but we have not sold property.
But can anybody tell me what agreement form is?
City Attorney Rahala?
So the agreement form is really just the form that the agreement takes.
But the city council never approved that, right?
Right, so that would be essentially the purchase and sale agreement if it was by sale. So with the purchase, to the mayor's point, in my 11 years with the city of Tigard, we've never sold property. So, but with the purchases that we have, council has seen the purchase and sale agreement. If there are little tweaks that we're still trying to make with the other party, typically council's action will be to approve, subject to final approval by the city manager and city attorney. So what the second part of that section is getting at is does the pre-approval, does that mean that it comes back to council as the final form, or does that mean that council says, these are the terms in concept, come back, you don't have to come back because we approve of it in concept? So that, the second half of that is really, I have no preference on that. That's really a policy question of council is, do you wish to see the final agreement and approve the final terms subject to little tweaks, or are you okay delegating the concept that we would then act on and effectuate in an agreement?
Can I ask, because, I mean, that is confusing. If the first sentence was kept, the city council can always then designate or give the city manager the authority to do X, Y, and Z without this confusing verbiage. Does that?
Yeah, I prefer to get rid of all those verbiage and just keep the first sentence, because I don't see what the rest of them actually, I don't understand what they do actually. So I just don't want to unnecessarily make the process burdensome for staff, right? Because the whole reason for this amendment is to make things easier for everybody. And if I don't understand what the second sentence says.
Okay. So there's a proposal of 2 adjustments to take place on it. Councilor Robbins?
To continue this topic, my understanding of this is to say we can pre-approve the term. So we want to sell X building, and we say if somebody gives us $500,000, we'd be happy with that, and we approve that. That's what it means to say pre-approve. But if we go with that, then that means then the city manager and city attorney can, and the broker and everyone finds a buyer, they buy it, but they still couldn't really complete it without telling us, because we might have to see any tweaks anyway. So I kind of don't understand when I think about it. Now, if the city council does not pre-approve terms, you're still going to have to come back anyway. So why don't we I move that we take all that out, because of course we can set the price, right? So I agree that we should just leave the one sentence.
Councilor Gadusi?
One subset that sort of concerns me a little bit is striking through some of the publicity with any of the sales. So one part is the 3.44010 A, where it talks about, giving property owners between up to a certain amount that notice as being sold, or reaching out to people that have previously, requested information about that, because it seems that if we're going through the process of selling it, property owners around there are going to be most impacted, so they should be notified. And I didn't see that in the state ordinance specifically.
So correct, that's not in the state statute. I believe this has come up before. So there is a remnant parcel on the corner of 72nd and Dartmouth that was needed, or 72nd and 99, that was acquired as part of the right-of-way improvements there. And we have looked at selling it. It has been problematic to sell, and one of the problems has been the complexity of this code. And in terms of the publicity, if the city would, it's always in the city's best interest to get the most value for the property. And so it would make sense that we would notify anybody who is interested in it. The remnant parcel that we have right now, there's really only one party that it makes sense for, because it's a landlocked, non-developable parcel. And so there's only one party that actually could acquire it and do anything with. So a concern with keeping the notification of the property owners is, I want to make sure that it's an open, fair, competitive process all the time, and that we're not giving favoritism to a specific party just because they're close by. So it's always in our interest to make sure that it's well publicized, but I wouldn't want to be giving anybody a head start or a competitive advantage that somebody farther away wouldn't get. So my preference would be to leave that to a case-by-case basis based on what makes sense in the situation.
Additional follow-up questions or comments?
I looked at it differently, that provides clarification. Thank you. My concern was, hey, we're going to develop this thing on this land that's right next to your land. Surprise, there's now a condo. Well, whatever. Yeah.
Counselor Hu?
But I see different. This is not a development, right? We're just selling it, so it's not the same as development. So I can see both points, but I more agree with the city attorney. So.
And you look sorry about that. So thank you for the robust discussion. I see 2 recommended adjustments or changes, amendments. In section B, to keep, it will direct the city manager. And in C, to get rid of everything after the first sentence, after terms of disposition period. Are we comfortable with the adjustments in this discussion and voting on it, or is this something that we would like to see a final result and brought back? Councilor Wolf.
So, just being a bit of a Bob rules, so we have a motion on the floor that got seconded, right? I thought, right? So should we just let it die? And yeah. Okay.
I mean, we can also amend it.
So this is like deja vu, because the motion is on the floor. So then we have to.
Yeah, so we can amend the motion,
Amend the
or
mo-
we could let it die.
I can attempt to amend it.
Sure.
So then that is separate, right? So then you make a motion to amend,
And
and
we
then we
vote on the
approve, and then we
amendment
go back
first.
and approve the whole thing. Okay.
All right, I move to amend the proposed section 3.44.010B as follow. If the city council decides to dispose of the property, it will direct the city manager or designee to take further appropriate action, to take appropriate action, period. And can I make the second motion just this one? And also subsection C, delete everything after the first sentence, which ends with disposition period.
Is there a second on the amendment?
Also,
Okay. The amendment has been moved and seconded. This is a vote only on the amendment. Does that need to be a roll call vote? No. Okay. All of those in favor of the amendment, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nay.
Okay. The amendment passes. I'm doing the math. 6 to 1. And so we are back to the original motion of ordinance 25-03 with the approved amendments. Will the city recorder please read the number and title of the ordinance?
Ordinance number 25-03, an ordinance amending Tigard Municipal Code, Chapter 3.44, regarding the disposition of surplus real property as amended.
Thank you. Will the city recorder conduct a roll call vote, starting with Youth Councilor Minany for an advisory vote?
Youth Councilor Mainini,
Yes.
Councilor Shaw,
Yes.
Council President Wolf,
yes.
Councilor Godusi,
No. Sorry.
Councilor Hu,
Yes.
Mayor Lube,
Yes.
Councilor Robbins,
Yes.
Councilor Schlack.
No.
Thank you. The motion is adopted by a vote of 5 to 2 of the council. The next item on the agenda is to discuss the July 4th drone show, and we have Communication Manager Wyatt to give the report. Welcome.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Kent Wyatt, City's Communications Manager. With me tonight is Cindy Murphy, who has been doing some work with us on events this year, in particular the July 4th drone show. In particular, why we're here tonight, this is a follow-up on in August of 2024, we presented feedback from the first drone show that we had. As you may remember, it was well attended with over 10,000 folks in attendance at that event. And a little bit of background for the folks who are new on the council. That first drone show was funded by Transient Lodging Tax. Last year was a bit of a transition year between Ron Royce and the city. Sydney helped out with that along with our team. So this year we're back to get some feedback from council on how to improve this event and thoughts that they have on everything from traffic control to programming to the number of drones that we have. The feedback that we received, and we heard from about 700 folks in the community after last year's event, was about 63% of folks found the event to be excellent or good. That said, there were a number of things that were highlighted in the survey of areas of room for improvement, so we do want to address a couple of those tonight. If we could move to the next slide. So the three things that we're here to highlight today is traffic control being one of them. Hopefully you guys didn't have too bad of experience exiting the event. We have heard some stories that it was a challenge for folks. So traffic control being one of them. The size of the drone show. So when City Council elected to move towards the drone show last year, they were kind of laid out different number of drones, what that might look like for the city. We settled on 200 drones. This year we have a couple other options for consideration for council as we move forward with this event. And then some other considerations. I know there's been interest expressed by councilors on family-friendly activities, what that looks like, food and beverage vendors, what that looks like. And that's part of why we have Cindy here today to talk a little bit about how we're addressing those areas. But if we can move to the next slide, which will talk about traffic control. So 10,000 folks at Tigard High School Stadium was a lot last year. Well exceeded prior attendance at the 4th of July event that we had. In response to that, Cindy's done some work on research on how we can better do traffic control, knowing that our police officers, this is one of their busiest days of the year, and so we do need to have some other resources in place. Working with a traffic control management firm, we got some rough estimates on what that might look like on how we can improve the flow of traffic. We've identified 4 intersections that potentially would require assistance. Each of those costing roughly $2,000 to have staffing out there and to address some of the challenges at each of those intersections. So the traffic control is one of the things that we continue to take a look at, along with actually having folks there this year. And something we've done in prior events, especially LT Gray, is to have a bike valet. So as a way of encouraging alternative transportation, to employ a bike valet, which we've had with some pretty good success in prior events. So that is another option for us as we consider about how to get folks in and out of the event in a safe manner. Next slide, please. So the bulk of it, the actual drone show, we did hire a firm last year to perform the drone show, everything from launching the drones to music, what went up in the air. I will say we had, and we'll continue to have complete control over what those drones look like. So there you see the City of Tigard logo. We also had the Balloon Festival represented last year. We had some Main Street art. So very Tigard-centric, which would be something that we would want to continue this year with the show that we have. So for 200 drones, this kind of lays out what we got last year, what we were able to do. This is pretty typical in what we've looked at for cities our size, 200 drones in the air, coordinated launches, requires a little less setup. One of the things that feedback that we received last year was on some of the music and the lack of maybe synchronization between that. We have already took steps towards that in talking with somebody in the professional industry for audio to make sure that it's more connected, also able to hear. So if we do assume 10,000 people again, that'd be great if we have that. But if that's there, folks could actually hear better the quality of the music, along with, now that this is a city event, some of the programming that we're talking about may require microphones, speakers for presentations or remarks from elected officials or others in the community. So having that infrastructure when it comes to the audio and sound is especially important for this event. So this is what it looks like for 200 drones. This is what we had last year. Did want to present a couple other options just as you consider the future of this event. The next slide that you'll see is for 300 drones. As we get up into 300 and 400 drones, obviously cost is increases somewhat significantly, $20,000-ish each time we add another 100 drones to it. These tend to be larger cities. Nashville, Tennessee is one that had 300 drones at their show. You know, obviously more advantages to what it looks like, the clarity, that you can see some of the details and transitions. It is a benefit of more drones in the air. And then the last option that we've laid out is 400 drones. This tends to be your larger shows, sometimes events. Major events will have 400 drones. Can do everything from, as you see there, a cool little dinosaur figure, and a little more movement, a little more flexibility when it comes to storytelling and some of the effects that can be laid out. But that said, if you see the price tag for that is about $140,000 to $150,000. Before we move to the programming and activities side of it, did want to get council's initial thoughts or feedback on the number of drones. If you were at the show last year, what that experience was like, if that seemed like the right amount, or if it's worth pursuing a larger number.
I would say larger, but Council President Wolf?
So Kent, does the length of time change or just the actual program itself improve?
Mainly just the programming. The length is pretty set.
Okay, thank you.
Any specific feelings on, Councilor Gadusi?
Have we completely killed a fireworks show? So is it just choosing the number of drones versus fireworks?
Fireworks show is always an option for council. This last year was the first year for the drone show, and we have numbers to provide if you're interested in that. So fireworks is a possibility based on the wishes of council.
Councilor Shaw?
Thank you, and perhaps following up on Councilor Goody's question, do we have numbers from when there was fireworks? Because I recall it having attended a number of years significantly smaller than the drone show, because I think it was new and different. Do you have numbers for that?
For how many attended the show?
The fireworks?
We were looking at a lot smaller, 2,000 to 4,000. Very kind of old-timey feel to it. The drone show obviously did attract a lot larger crowd, I think, because of the newness to it.
Yeah, it definitely was new. It was the first time we had done it. Because of that, we didn't know what was going to be the difference between the 200, the 300, or the 400. Some of the complaints and maybe some positive opportunities for change that I had heard was, can we lengthen the amount of time, because it was very short for the amount of time it took to bike, ride, or drive there. Also, the distance was an issue. And so I note on your presentation, you say 300 drones can be seen from a larger display area, making it visible from distance. So the question, would 400 drones also have that attribute?
Correct. You would increase the visibility. Some of that is going to depend on the area that we launch from. I know one of the complaints we heard last year was folks in Summerfield had traditionally been on the golf course to watch the fireworks. I don't necessarily think 300 drones would allow that to happen, just because of the barriers in there. But yes, in general, there would be more visibility.
Okay, great, thank you. Because I too had heard quite a bit from Summerfield, and we're talking about maybe less mobility, elder community may not be able to get to towards the high school, so having something that's visible in the air, I think, from my perspective, would be something I'd be interested, so I'd like to see more of them if we were to go forward with the drones. And then also from a budget perspective, I'm assuming that the bike valet is not included in here, or the additional audio or sound, and maybe if we needed to reduce costs, we may not have as many speeches from electeds, but.
I think bike valet is going to be about $1,000 per event. And then audio, we have somebody that would run the audio, and then it's a matter of whether we want to rent the equipment or purchase it, depending on if we would be able to use it for other events.
Great. Well, I think another reason, and then I'll yield time to other counselors, is because it's also heavily in the fire season. And so part of the reason was the attempt to ensure that we had a program that was safe of creating fires, recognizing that our community does also have fireworks of their own, sometimes legal, sometimes illegal, but that was one of the benefits, and also they reduced the amount of smoke that was created by fireworks for those who had respiratory problems. So I just wanted to note that those are some of the positive attributes that we had seen from that event. And with that,
Yeah.
Mayor, thank you.
I appreciate you pointing that out, and I should have opened with that, and I thought council did an excellent job of communicating that to the community on why we moved to that, to the drone show, noise pollution, less debris. We did get a lot of thanks from folks who, pets, veterans, folks who have children with autism. There was definitely some benefits of not having the loud noises.
Yeah, I think that's actually why we had so many people here, because it was probably the first time a lot of community members and regional community members, which is what the TLT dollars are for, to bring people in, people were able to participate who maybe didn't previously because of firework issues. I'm going to go to Councilor Robbins. Okay. Excellent. Councilor Gadusi?
So that was one of the reasons why I requested the additional information that we have here. One thing that I was concerned about is by removing the fireworks from a central location, then are we now having more people within the community that are doing it? And, you know, if PTSD is a concern or a question, having it, you know, spontaneously in your neighborhood is a lot more concerning than having a preset time and a preset location. That said, the data doesn't support what I had hypothesized. So it actually shows there was a decrease in fireworks calls last year as opposed to the year before, which is nice.
Yeah, and we have the chief here because we end up having a very robust discussion. For counselors who haven't been here before, July 4th is our absolute busiest day. Every officer is out there, which is why we are looking at potentially not using officers for intersections to allow our officers to continue to react to our community members making phone calls and having private security taking care of intersections where we may not have to have officers. But do you feel like there was any change in amount or frequency or location of the fireworks, depending upon what you can remember?
Mayor, no, I think that it was pretty consistent with the prior year, at least. We had 4th of July is really interesting in terms of the types of calls that we get. It's always our highest call volume day of the year. In the really hot years that we've had, we actually do see the calls drop. I think people are a little more cognizant about the fire danger in the community. But if it hasn't been super hot, leading up to it, we do see those increase. And so 2023 and 2024 were very consistent with each other. And if I remember correctly, looking back, the weather was not too dissimilar from one year to the next either. So we had nice weather both years. It wasn't super hot, but then it also indicated our call volume was reasonably close. If I remember right, one year, one of the years we did have a red flag warning come up the day before.
Oh, it was a debacle.
Don't remember which year it was, but
I think 22, wasn't it? 22.
So
yeah.
I do know that it was pretty consistent from 23 to 24. So if we're comparing, trying to delineate whether or not the drone show created an increase in the community, I wouldn't be willing to say that. That it had a negative impact on the number of illegal fireworks. I will say this, we have way too many people doing illegal fireworks in the community, regardless of whether or not there's a fireworks show or a drone show sponsored by the city. There is way too many.
And that is not a problem that is Tigard specific.
It is not.
Okay. I have a question. Have we considered, I think we briefly talked about it last year, partnering with anybody for sponsorship, perhaps, of sharing some of these expenses?
Yeah, that is one avenue that we can pursue. Certainly one that we are looking to pursue when it comes to programming and activities, because I know that last year the first, I think, attendee arrived at 3:20 in the afternoon for a show that didn't start until a lot later in the day. So if we're going to have a captive audience, to have folks there. So we would be interested, whether it's sponsoring or partnering. When it comes to programming, we've had some discussions about partnering, whether that's partnering internally with our rec to have movies in a park beforehand, whether that's to have local dance troupes, kind of the good synergy between July 4th and Balloon Festival is, and he has some contacts with programming that we might potentially be able to include in that lineup. To your larger question, though, I would need to look at more sponsorships for the event itself. I know our recreation department does do sponsorships, so it is something that we could take a look at.
When do we have to decide drone size?
The sooner the better. We have bids from 3 companies. They all have kind of a placeholder on the date, and depending on when we decide, they're all able to do it. So, I think we need to have that locked down by the end of the month on which company that we would choose.
Councilor Schacht?
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you to the team for putting this presentation together. I spoke with the assistant city manager prior to this because I was just looking at the costs associated with these drones, and I wanted to understand what was the cost of the fireworks show. And the number I got back was $19,500. We're looking at the low end, 3xing, 4xing that amount for the drone show that we currently have. It was $80,000 before, and enlarging it's just going to keep going up by multiples of $20,000. I would not feel comfortable increasing the size of the drone show just looking at that cost. I look at it and my gut just tells me that's not an appropriate use or a preferable use of our taxpayer dollars. So that's just me. Yes, I am biased. I like fireworks as well. Legal fireworks, but fireworks nonetheless. So that's just my 2 cents.
Council President Wolf?
Thank you, Mayor. Just to add, the things that I am curious about is kind of that whole, as Mayor asked a lot of questions about specific costs. So if we added program components, so that really became more of a day, what would that look like? I'm curious maybe to bump up one if it justified a full event and that it was visible from Summerfield. So you really start to connect and provide opportunities for those that can't, navigate to Tigard High. And I also know, I think we used to, through the events grants, give money towards the 4th of July event. So kind of gathering all that together, how do we spend money on this and what would a whole day or a chunk of a day look like? So that's kind of where I'm opting between the first and the second. And I think our numbers will drop just because the curiosity factor is, not in place. But I'm intrigued by bumping if we can justify it as a full kind of event, but not to the 3rd tier. That seems too much.
Agreed. Councilor Hu?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for the presentation. So I'm looking at last year's debriefing from August, and negative feedback is some feel the drone show lacked the excitement punch of traditional fireworks. And the second one is for the cost, the show seems short in duration. So according to you, you said, even if we increase the number of drones, the duration will still be the same. So that's not going to change. How about, and then there's another suggestion for improvements, coordination between the drones and music. So I'm thinking, no matter if we decide on 200 or 300, what can we do in addition? Music or laser show? maybe you will present that later, to increase the excitement or punch. So do you have any idea how we increase the punch of
I mean, I think that's a great comment, one that we did hear, the lack of the connection on the audio. That is being taken care of. We have somebody contracted for July 4th that will help with the audio. One, making it so you can hear it, and two, synchronization, which was not great last year. Those can be definitely addressed. The length of the show, is not going to vary either way. But we do, in the initial planning, and obviously wanting to hear from council, we do envision it as being a day-long programming, really starting from 3 to the fireworks, and how do we fill that in. That programming will take place regardless if it's 200 drones or 400 drones. So those type of things are already in the works.
how do you increase the excitement?
So I will say, the company we worked with last year they did what we asked. So I think one way to do that is to involve more people in the process of what the drones look like, what the show is. I think last year there were a lot of landmarks in Tigard, but not necessarily a story of like, here's what we're trying to tell. I think that could be one approach to make it a little less of just, hey, here are 10 things that you might recognize from Tigard. So that creativity or storytelling side can be ramped up, regardless of the number of drones.
Okay, so thank you.
I think this really has an opportunity to become continue to develop as one of the foundational events in Tigard. I think, perhaps last year we were not prepared for how excited people were. Hence, we didn't have enough food vendors. We didn't have enough to do. Traffic was a nightmare. I saw it ahead of time when I took the picture that everybody uses and nobody gives me credit for, is up there. There was so many, and people were excited. So I think also setting up the right expectations of this is an all-day festival that ends, or an all-evening festival that ends with a drone show, is also, I think, a really important part of it. But the sound was, we were off to the side, and it was horrible to try to hear. So I think fixing these little complaints will be really, really helpful, and also perhaps. One of the things that I previously suggested is if we could get a recording of the audio and have it available on the website, so even people in Summerfield, when they see the drone start, they can hit the music, and even if you are not, exactly in the field, you can participate in some sort of way. I think could be fun as well. But if we can, if the council is open to sponsorship opportunities, so maybe it takes away one of our logos and it has a sponsorship logo up there, but it helps share the cost of the drones, I'd be interested in exploring it. But if feasible, I would be, I think, supportive of 300 drones in order to be a little bit bigger so people have better visual sight lines, can see it from a little farther away, and fixing those other things could really make it a fun family event, right? Like, kids want face painting, they want balloons, they want some sort of a thing that they can run around on the field, to really have that family feel, I think would be fun. And of course, kicking it off with the middle of Millen Independence Day parade, right next door. If there's even a way to incorporate that, like maybe that's the start and the end is the kickoff for the festival.
Yes, even recently we've had some discussions about a citywide celebration. One of the projects we're wrapping up in June, July is the Equitable Engagement project. And with the consultants, we've talked about what kind of celebration or handoff do we have? Is that something that we could incorporate potentially? Those are the type of things, to your point, that we might be able to integrate. And then along with the recording, I think Councilor Shaw last year had the request, could we broadcast it? That's something we can look into, especially now that we have more time with TVC TV, if that would be a possibility. So for folks who maybe don't have some mobility issues that can't get out there, that could be another possibility.
And probably more restrooms. Everybody has to pee, right? And it's tough, especially in that stadium. The restrooms go quick even on football days. So, but those are the things that make the experience, right? If you're busy, so it's the food, the restrooms, the activities. That's what makes it fun. Additional questions, comments? Yeah, Councilor Robbins.
To your point about the sound and maybe putting it on the website or broadcasting it back many, many ages ago when I lived in Connecticut, we used to have a huge fireworks display, and it was always at least partially sponsored by the local radio station, and you could tune into the radio station, which I still listen to the radio. And the sound came through the radio, so you weren't trying to hear the speaker at the river. You had your radio, or somebody brought a radio, which I'm sure they still exist, and so you could hear it wherever you were. And so if we could get some kind of partnership like that, I don't know, but that's what I experienced, and it worked really well. So
It's kind of like a drive-in movie theater,
Yeah.
or I think some people with Christmas lights have done that too,
Yeah.
to log onto a certain radio frequency.
yeah. And also, I think that it does go with our 5 E's, right? To be more environmentally responsible to do this, rather than all the mess and the waste of the fireworks. And with the tariffs from China, I think most fireworks are made in China, and with the new tariffs that we have, the cost is going to go up for regular fireworks. Hopefully it'll be taken care of by July, but everything's in flux right now.
Councilor Gadusi.
One other concern that I do have with drones is I know that a lot of signal jammers and scramblers have become more and more accessible, and we've seen some other shows that have not gone well because of it. So I'd want to have that sort of caution in the back of our mind, because I'm a Debbie Downer.
I think Cindy has had some conversations about that, because that has come up a couple times, and without getting too great a detail, I think she can share a little bit on what's being done to hopefully avoid that.
Not necessarily in regards to scramblers, though, but it's more safety precautions. You know, the industry, it's FAA regulated. Let's start with that. It's a very strict regulated industry. There are things that happen. Moving forward, I know that I've been conversing with several of these companies that we have bids out for. You know, safety, I've told you with another event that I run, safety is always number one for me. So drones are new to me. I'm asking a lot of silly questions just to learn. I mean, sorry, just putting it out there. But my understanding is that there's some double checks, you know, going on, and I'm asking a lot of questions, making sure that we're safe. You know, a pilot double check enhancing the barrier, the red zone, we call it, you know, all those things, trying to make sure that we're safe. But the scramblers, I don't know how you control them. I don't know. You know, drones are new to me, but it is always a concern. Safety, 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 safety.
Additional questions, comments, Councilor Shaw?
Yeah, just perhaps one that both Council President Wolf had brought up and Councilor Hu is the length of time. And I'm wondering if there's a way we can explore how to, without slowing the program down because of the punch that Councilor Hu had mentioned, but just if there was a way to integrate, I don't know if it'll be laser technology, but just to expand that time, because I know that was one of the complaints that we had received. And also, I think it's a very legitimate question to ask your vendors. They want these shows to move forward. They want them to be safe. They don't want them to be have scrambling issues. So I would just ask them, and they're probably going to be very forthright about how they're protecting and going to minimize any interference.
I think one thing that may help with the time is we heard several comments about where's the grand finale. Like they wanted the bursts and things at the end, like doing a better job on our side of planning for that so people know, hey, it's over, is something, you know, that's an area of improvement that can be done without any additional cost.
Maybe it just says thank you and good night to finish it out. Yeah, Councilor Hu?
Yeah, I support finding a sponsor or sponsors for the show.
I would also add one that aligns with our values for the request. Do you feel like you have the direction that you need?
So just to kind of summarize, I mean, we could take a look at sponsors this month. Is that to increase it to 300 drones? That would be the intent?
Yes, I agree, not for. And Council President was mumbling, so yeah, so.
I was, my apologies. Yes, to reduce and to really just, again, that overall budget, right? I appreciate Mayor's request to how do we, because I think that was some of the feedback too, right? Is just the ROI on a 11-minute or 12-minute show with the $80,000 hit. So I think any way to reduce the overall cost, but I have a hard line at 300 and just grateful for the exploration. Cindy and Kent, thank you.
Yeah, Councilor.
I think 300 is good, but if we had a sponsor that came in and said, I would like to make this a Hallmark event in partnership with Tigard, I appreciate your values, and I'd be willing to bump it up so we can get the 400, I'd want us to say, consider that.
Me too. If we can find the extra 50,000, I will actually go for 400.
We could have 1,000 drones by then. Well, I'll commit to you by the end of March. We'll follow up with you on what we've found and the feasibility of that.
Excellent. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Our next item on the agenda is tax increment financing, agency best practices, and we have redevelopment project manager Farrelly to give the report. Are we technically acting as the town center development agency under this, or can we get the briefing as council?
I think you can get the briefing as council since you're not
Excellent,
taking any
okay.
action. Yeah.
But we will know that this is, when we use our other hats.
Right. Good evening, Mayor Lube and city councilors. I'm Sean Farrelly, redevelopment manager, and here to give a presentation on tax increment financing best practices. This was last given in 2023, and since then there's been 3 new board/council members, a new youth counselor. So this will be new material for them, and also for the 4 who have received it. It's good for a refresher, also for people who might be watching at home. Good, solid, and maybe a little going into the weeds of urban renewal/tax increment financing. Next slide. And please, if you have any questions, you can just stop me along the way. So Tigard has 2 TIF districts, Tigard Triangle and the city center, and I'm going to use the terms TIF district and urban renewal kind of interchangeably, but just know that the trend in Oregon is to use the term TIF district. That's just been a change in nomenclature in the last 5 or 6 years. Next slide. So our 2 TIF plans very much are helping implement the strategic plan. I would say especially strategic priority 1, create a well-connected and attractive and accessible pedestrian network, and also strategic priority 3 to ensure development and growth are supporting the vision. Next slide. So why use TIF? There's many opportunities for improvements and redevelopment in cities that need funding. City general funds typically lacked the funds to contribute to these opportunities, and TIF can provide a funding source to bridge the gap. Should also note that some of the slides tonight I'll be showing are from created by Elaine Howard, who's an urban renewal consultant that we've worked with in the past. Next slide. So here's a real crash course, the real down and dirty version. So property taxes that are raised in cities or jurisdictions, they go to the regular taxing jurisdiction, city, county, school district, fire districts, etc. And those grow 3% a year, appreciation that the Oregon State Constitution limits. There can also be increase when there's substantial improvements to properties. Next slide. When an urban renewal or TIF district is formed, then some of that increase in revenue. Next slide. Or this is animated, not very low. That will go to the urban renewal area. So the increases, the 3% appreciation over the frozen base, and I'll talk about that in a second, plus the substantial improvements, those go to fund the urban renewal agency and to pay for the projects that are in the TIF district plans. Next slide. It's a little different way of looking at it. So it's showing that over time, we still have that frozen base there, the gray at the bottom. That's frozen in time when the district is formed. Taxing jurisdictions still keep on getting that frozen base. The increment over time accrues to the urban renewal agency and to fund projects that are in an adopted plan. When that district ends, that tax revenue goes back to all of the taxing jurisdictions. And the reason we're doing that is to create development that wouldn't have necessarily happened by focusing public investments to incentivize private development. Next slide. So again, what is tax increment financing? It's an economic development tool. It's a kind of unique, it's a financing tool, but also a plan that has projects, uses to address blighting influences in specific areas. I'll talk about blighting in a second. Functions on increases in property taxes in the TIF areas, and it's used all over Oregon. Next slide. Forgot to count how many there are, but quite a number being used all over the state. Many cities have multiple TIF districts within them. The smaller ones typically just have the small ones. And this was accurate as of 2023. Next slide. So what is blight? That has to be a precondition before you can form a TIF area. And this is actually defined in state statute, and it generally covers underdevelopment or underutilization of property, poor condition of buildings, and inadequacy of infrastructure, including streets and utilities. You could see this, for example, in the triangle, where you may have gone on a street that appears as a right-of-way that turns into a dirt path at some point. Also in the triangle, there's areas that are unsewered. So this city council has to make a finding of blight before it can form one of these areas. Next slide, please. So how does it function? The income source is the yearly property tax collections. That's based on growth within the boundary. The expenses are projects, programs, administration. Spending limit, it is capped by maximum indebtedness, and that's a term we use a lot when talking about our budgets and plans. That's just a way of saying the total amount of money that can be spent over the life of the district on these projects, programs, and administration. It's called maximum indebtedness because technically it has to be money that is borrowed and paid back with the TIF proceeds. Next slide. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time on this just because I remember starting out, this question would come up a few times a year from residents, and it's always a little complicated to explain. So after this, hopefully you'll be able to explain it too if someone asks you. Why is urban renewal on my property tax bill when I'm not in a TIF district? And I pulled this sample property tax statement from someone who is not in a TIF district. So let me spend a few slides explaining why. So next slide. So this tax rate, and it is not Tigard's tax rate. Actually, Tigard, I know, only gets 17% of its property tax dollar. So this is just a sample tax rate. As I mentioned before, property taxes go to all the different taxing jurisdictions, county, school, metro, etc. Next slide. Now this is where it comes in, that the first column there, which lists all taxing districts and their rates. Again, this is not Tigard. And the first column there says property tax without urban renewal. So all those different tax bills are add up to $1,545. Now look at it with an urban renewal district in place, and it still adds up to $1,545. So people's property taxes are not going up; they're just being distributed differently. And so there's that $45 line item for urban renewal. So I'll get to why it would still be on someone's property tax with, even if they're not in the district. Next slide.
Does anyone have any questions on that before we move on? Okay.
So there's a division of taxes with TIF, and that does not increase the property taxes. It uses increases in property taxes that are already happening. It is a line item, as I mentioned. So the assessor has to go through this process, to go through these steps when distributing the TIF. They calculate the TIF to be collected, they distribute it citywide to property taxpayers, and then they collect the property tax revenues. Next slide. So I'm going to show a few slides in conceptual detail on how the assessor does that. Next slide. So distribution, let's imagine there is a city that has 60 houses, and, or sorry, 40 houses, and those, the total assessed value is $4 million. Let's say that 10 of those houses are within an UR district. And those are worth $1 million. That would generate $1 million in property tax. Next slide. So it is actually not the fact that the houses that are not in the district have 0 and the ones in the district have 49. But next slide. But it's distributed equally throughout the city. So everyone's property tax will show up with a smaller amount, $12.25. And that's the distribution and collection. So again, no, you're not paying more property taxes, it's just being distributed. It's kind of like it would be a logistical nightmare, where it's been described to me, to try to like only find those properties within the district and take the property tax out. Then for simplification purposes, it's just distributed across and each of the taxing jurisdictions, and would still get the amount of their aggregate amount of money. And then the TIF district is also getting the same amount of money that would have been accrued over the frozen base. Next slide. So there is an impact to the other taxing districts, or our partner jurisdictions. It diverts funds that would have gone to them. They continue receiving taxes on that frozen base, of course. The idea is they're temporarily foregoing taxes on the growth in the TIF area, and that growth may not have occurred but for the TIF area. So at the end of the district, then property values will be worth more, and there will be more income accruing to the jurisdictions. Next slide. So schools are a little different. I'm not going to claim that I'm an expert on Oregon funding of schools. It's a very complex formula involving equalizing school funding. Basically, the bottom line is that at the local level, TIF doesn't have a big impact on school districts. It's kind of diffused across the state at an aggregate level. So that's, Councilor Wolf.
Sean, you're spot on, and I think the only thing with a school board hat on is the state school fund absorbs any kind of difference because of the distribution model, but there is an impact, right? It's not an infinite amount of money that goes into the state school fund. So I think the districts have always, TTSD's always supported Tualatin and Tigard's TIFs, but there is a impact. But to your point, well said, it's not a local impact.
Right, in aggregate, there's an impact at the state level, but it's diffused. Next slide. So there are, all of our TIF district regulations originate with the state. The limitations they have on TIF for cities with population over 50,000, like Tigard, there cannot be more than 15% of assessed value and property in a TIF district, and no more than 15% of acreage of the city can be in a TIF district. Another limitation is for existing plans, you can't increase the size by more than 20% of the original acreage. And the maximum indebtedness can't go up by more than 20% of the original maximum indebtedness using indexing. You can go above 20 with concurrence from 75% of the other taxing districts, and that's what we did when we amended the city center plan back in 2021. Next slide. So Tigard is, let's say, well below the state limits. The total assessed value is $8.3 billion, and there's about 542 million that are within those districts. So 6.7% of Tigard's assessed value is within these TIF districts. And then similarly, the acreage, we're at about 9.5% of the total acreage. Next slide. So how's a TIF plan adopted? Well, there has to be public input. You have to develop goals and objectives, projects, initial budgets. An agency that is set up by the city reviews and decides whether to send out for public review. There's a presentation to the county that's required. In some cases, you have to get 3 out of 4 of the jurisdictions that produce the most property tax revenue to provide concurrence. Then the Planning Commission will review it and make sure it conforms with the comprehensive plan. The City Council will have a hearing and vote and provide a notice to all residents. And in Tigard, there used to be a requirement for those plans to be voted on. With the last update of the city charter, that was not included. So as of now, the City Council can adopt TIF plan or TIF district if it wishes. Next slide. So this is how the Town Center Development Agency, which is Tigard's TIF agency, is set up. As you are well aware, you serve as the board of the TCDA, and that City Council serving as the board is by far the most common setup in TIF districts around Oregon. Maybe a couple of larger cities have separate agencies, but most cities of our size and smaller, City Council serves as the board. And then the executive, as many of you know, executive director of the TCA is the city manager, and then regular staffing tree is shown there. And then we have the Town Center Advisory Commission, who provides advice on implementation and budgets. Next slide. So as the elected body, the agency board establishes policy, adopts budgets, decides on projects, makes final decisions. They have to respond to the public on these issues. TCAC provides input and recommendations for those decisions, and the agency board might not always follow those recommendations. TCAC advises on more global matters and details and implementation are the responsibility of staff. Next slide. So now I'm going to talk some specifics about our 2 TIF districts. The city center, sometimes called the downtown TIF district. It's a 19-year-old district approved by voters in 2006. There's been 2 substantial amendments. We did a 38-acre expansion in 2017, and we increased the maximum indebtedness and duration in 2021. So the maximum indebtedness now is $42.8 million. There's $30.3 million remaining in maximum indebtedness. The district will expire in 2035. It's 228 acres, and the current TIF take is about $950,000. Next slide. So the vision that we're trying to fulfill in the downtown is really getting a lot more people living down there, since it does have good transit access, good access to the Fanner Creek Trail, attracting new residents, new residential development, and also new customers for the well-loved retail district of Main Street. Next slide. The goals of this TIF district are recognize the value of natural resources, capitalize on commuter rail and Fano Creek as catalyst for future development. Downtown transportation should be multimodal. Streetscape and public spaces should be pedestrian friendly, and promote high quality development of retail, office, and residential. Next slide. So in the plan, the projects are broken down into these categories: street improvements, streetscape improvements, bike ped facilities, parks, public spaces, public facilities, planning and development assistance, and property acquisition and disposition. So each one of those categories has a number of named plans underneath them. Next slide. So some examples of the street and streetscape improvements that we have completed: Main Street, Green Street Phase 1 and 2, Burnham Street improvements, the parking lot on Burnham, and that Ash Avenue connection. Should point out, not all of these were, well, none of these were completely paid for with TIF, but their TIF did contribute to each of them. Next slide. So some of the public spaces and trails: Rotary Plaza, Tigers Root Heritage Trail, the part that's within the district were helped out by TIF. And then next slide. Our big public space, of course, is Universal Plaza that was completed a couple years ago. Next slide. We have our building improvement grant program, started in 2009. There's been 43 facade and interior improvement grants. Really can see a lot of, obvious change that has happened because of some of these grants, some of the investments that have jointly been made by the business property owners and the agency. Next slide. So we've incentivized or otherwise helped guide some mixed use and affordable housing in the city center. At Wolof, Maine, the Knoll Senior Housing Project on Hall and Hunziger. Next slide. Alongside senior apartments, which are in the district, there was no direct TIF funding in that, but it was a partnership with a private affordable housing developer, and kind of staffed by TIF staff to help make that project happen. Next slide. And then a mixed-use project that is mostly completed, or at least the residential part, Ava mixed-use project, which was once a really blighted property on Main Street, actually contaminated, that the agency bought, received brownfield grants, cleaned up, and prepared for redevelopment. Next slide. So now we'll talk about the Triangle. That was approved by the voters in 2017, 548 acres, so double the size, if not more, of the city center. Here's where the real difference is. The maximum indebtedness, $188 million. We have 179 still remaining. It's a 35-year district, and that'll expire in 2052. And then the current TIF is 1.7 million. So you can see that in 8 years, it's already double the TIF of the 19-year-old city center, and that's really because of the larger size, more properties, and assessed value, I would say there. So we expected it to produce more TIF, and it is. The goals of the Triangle Plan. Next slide. So to encourage meaningful involvement, to ensure the district reflects community values, provide a safe and effective multimodal transportation network, provide public utility improvements to support desired development, create a clear identity for the area as a fun and diverse place to live, work, shop, eat, and play by building upon existing and unique and desirable features, and provide financial and technical assistance to new and existing businesses and housing developments that contribute to the area's diversity and vitality. Next slide. So the TIF district has more consolidated project categories, I would say: transportation, public utilities, public spaces, facilities, and installations. redevelopment assistance and partnerships, and project administration. So again, each of these categories has a number of projects that are listed under them in the plan. Next slide. One other step that we took with the triangle was we did an 8-month engagement program with the public to really ensure that this TIF district, would benefit, a wide variety of people and really result in equitable development, and that equitable development strategy, finance plan, and preliminary design of some top rack projects was adopted by the board in 2021. That's really been our, our guiding document to implement the plan. And the top 2 projects that were rated there are affordable housing, which we've made quite a bit of investment in, and also securing parkland, which we are hot on the trail of, maybe. Next slide. So transportation, we are currently designing the 72nd Avenue improvement, street that really needs improvement, develop full sidewalk system for one. Very expensive project. We're going to need some outside sources in addition to TIF to implement that, but it is moving forward in terms of getting the design done. Next slide. Another really important transportation project in the district is the Red Rock Creek Trail. Again, this is going to take many years to implement just because of all the different properties that are involved. We're planning, been going through some planning exercises of it, and as properties redevelop, we'll be able to implement some of that trail a bit at a time. Next slide. So some of the affordable housing investments that we made, our first expenditure of TIF was actually to support the Red Rock Creek Commons, $200,000, helping close the gap there. Next slide. We've also made investment in Family Promises, a bridge to call home, helping them purchase the property and also make some renovations that are still currently in progress, but should still soon be completed. Next slide. Another investment which will soon be finishing up here is the Reach Dartmouth Crossing North project that I believe should be complete in April. That'll also include a small pocket park that'll be like a few months behind it, across the street from it. Next slide. And then in terms of market rate projects, we've also helped incentivize the Overland at Dartmouth and 72nd. Next slide. And the Steward project. So all told, there's been 730 apartments built or under construction in the district since it was formed. TIF agency didn't play a role in all of those projects, but we helped to get, I think, prime the pump to get things started. And now we're actually seeing a lot of projects happening without any TIF involvement. So that's good news that the market is being proven that there is demand for apartments in this district. Next slide. And the Triangle Opportunity Fund, which is kind of the sister program to the City Center Improvement Fund, has a slightly different focus and slightly different setup, but it's started in 2022, and we've provided matching grants to 7 businesses so far. Next slide. So that are my prepared slides, but I'm happy to answer any questions about any of the slides or anything that was not on the slides.
Is everyone feeling like a TIF expert now? No? Councilor Robbins?
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you for this. Super great to have it all laid out, to get a chance to study it. So my understanding is the tax base is frozen. Does it go up when a property is sold?
So there's, in terms of a TIF district, calling the base frozen, that just means that the property tax income at a point in time is frozen. So that, the revenue that goes to all the different districts, that stays the same. So that's the frozen base. The increased taxes that happen with the 3% a year appreciation in property tax, and then new development that happens, that accrues to the TIF agency for a certain period of time. And at the end of that time, then it all goes back to the districts. Now, is your question on
Let me try
property
again.
sale, is that
Yeah.
related to the state limitations? Because it actually doesn't change the property tax.
Okay,
ratio.
so then I probably don't understand what I'm talking about then. But so, my understanding was, so there's a frozen base. So say I own a property in a TIF district, my property tax doesn't go up. Is that correct?
Right.
Okay. What if I then sell my property and it gets reassessed, right? Because that happens when you sell. Does it stay frozen because it's in the TIF district, or does it get reassessed and go up?
So, yeah, there's a couple things. So in Oregon, anyway, when a property is sold, it is not reassessed. It's reassessed when you improve the property, make it bigger, add a new bedroom or something. Then property tax goes up. In the Oregon, under the Oregon property tax rules, property taxes are only going up 3% every year, no matter whether or not it's sold or not. If someone sells a property and then the next owner, does a complete renovation and adds to the square footage, then yes, it would be reassessed. But whether it's in or out of the TIF district doesn't come into play, because your property tax would be the same whether there was a TIF district there or not. It would just be divided up differently to the different taxing jurisdictions.
So even if I own a property in the TIF district, my property tax can still go up 3%?
Right. Yeah.
That 3% though goes back into the district rather than going to everywhere else.
And so when it expires, then it goes everywhere. But the taxes,
Every jurisdiction gets a raise.
Yeah, but it's not, but the taxes don't change.
Right.
Okay,
It's the
thank you.
same amount, just being divided differently. Yeah.
Counselor Hu?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Sean, for the presentation. So, I have a question about how was the amount of maximum indebtedness was determined? Is that during the budgeting process? The number was.
So during the plan development process, a list of projects was developed, and in discussions with the previous councils and discussions with other taxing jurisdictions, figuring out how long those jurisdictions would like the district to last, because it does influences their bottom line for a period of time. So basically, you develop the list of projects, you kind of take the temperature of other taxing jurisdictions about how long this should be in place, and then you figure out, well, how much TIF will be generated within this district within that period of time, and does it meet the needs of all the projects? That's what you kind of have to figure out. So like in the case of the city center, there's a lot of projects in there. $42 million is probably definitely won't cover implementing all of them. So we still have to look for other sources of funds, grants from other jurisdictions, federal, metro, county. But basically, when it was developed, basically a previous council thought $188 million for this amount of projects for this period of time was the right amount. And since they're actually set up, not to get too technical, but the triangle is set up a little bit differently than the city center in that at the end of 35 years, no matter whether we've hit that maximum debt or not, the district will end. And the city center, we can actually keep on collecting a little more. I mean, we can do a big borrowing at the end and then continue to pay off with the TIF. So there would be a little longer duration. We won't be issuing new TIF, but we will be collecting funds to pay off that debt. So two different ways of doing it. Typically because a smaller district takes a longer time to build up that TIF, to get enough funds to do all the projects in the plan.
So there seems to be a lot of, remaining amount left, and I'm not a big advocate of getting into debt. Personally, I don't like debt, but it seems like if we still have so much left, that suggests to me like we're not doing things fast enough or as expected. So are there a way we could rethink about using the indebtedness money and rethink about it and how we can use it more efficiently as a catalyst to fast track those developments so we can realize our vision faster rather than just wait. I'm not suggesting wait, but it's just like, can we do something to make development go faster? Because we still have so much left remaining,
So remember though that because we have to borrow the money under the state statutes, that's why it's called maximum indebtedness, we have to borrow it from someone. We do have to have sufficient income to cover that, the debt service. And until we get into the higher levels, then we can borrow a lot more. So it's there's trade-offs that have to be made. Our finance director works with a financial advisor and works with bond specialists. We have to be at the right place to borrow an amount of money that'll be covered by our current TIF, the debt service, and then also, you don't want it all going to debt service necessarily, because then you want to have some money that can be spent on projects as programs or projects as they come up. So it's a real balancing act. We're going to get to a point maybe in 10, 15 more years in the triangle anyway that we'll be able to borrow a really big amount and do a bunch of projects then. And we do have models that we have that kind of suggest when we should do these borrowings, but we at least, 8 years doesn't sound like it should be still in the beginning years, but it really is. We have to scale our borrowing to the amount of TIF that's being generated to pay off that debt service.
There's just a long runway, right?
Right.
You think about it like this, well, we're still down here where there hasn't been enough growth in order to really be able to have much more money. But yes, it feels like,
It's
we
chick-
should be able
I
to,
know.
but we have to wait for that frozen base and the tax growth to be significant enough to really have more money to be able to play with it. So the TIF district is a slow growing thing until you get to that leverage point. But it's a 35-year district, right?
Yeah, but for the downtown, it's less than 10 years, and we still have so much. It just feels like a chicken and egg thing to me. It's can we just, invest in something more aggressively, and then something will spur up because of that investment. I don't know. I just saw a YouTube video saying one TIF district using TIF money to build parking lots, parking structure, and that actually spur all the business. I'm not advocating for that, but it's just as an example, they used it and then, it spur all the business around it. And then, so anyway, I'm just questioning if we can somehow be a little bit more aggressive. I don't know, but Yeah, so that's my question. Thank you.
Yeah, so I will tell you, we were aggressive with the overland, right? Like, we did not have very much money coming in at all, and we took basically a majority of the budget for that year to help the overland and to spur, and because of the overland, things have been popping up. So we did do that where we could early on. But yeah, I mean, it wiped out our budget for the year, just by that one project. If I'm,
Yeah, that's accurate.
Counselor Shaw?
So following on former council president who, sorry, Council President Wolf, I too would, and not so much on the Tiger Triangle, but looking at the numbers too for the downtown, it took 19 years to spend 12.5 million. We have about 10 years left and we have 30.3 million. So it's the delta there. It's like, wow, we either got to speed up and I hear the mayor and understand the way the TIF district works, but I'm wondering too if there's a way we can spur, given that delta.
Yeah, well, I would love to have more money. So do. We have to work with our finance director and finance advisors because someone has to be willing to lend us the money, right? And they want to see that we have enough money to cover that debt with certainty, because bond councils are very, very conservative people. I don't know if you ever met one of them. So they really want to make sure that there's enough debt service to cover that. So I know with the city center, there probably is going to be a very big borrowing right at the end, and that's not great to hear now because that's not going to be until 2035. But in the interim, we can use our current borrowing capacity, hopefully pair it with other funds that may be available from the state, from the county, from Metro, as we've been doing to implement more of these projects, because I understand that people want to see these projects get implemented.
Any additional questions or comments? All right. Thank you, Mr. Farrelly.
Thank you.
We have no non-agenda items this evening and no executive session scheduled. I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, all of those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you so much. Good night, Tigard.